I'm very pleased to start a discussion, and I think that we have a very nice presentation, a lot of things to discuss, and please ask questions. And наши дорогие русские коллеги могут задавать вопросы по-русски, у нас есть замечательные переводчики, поэтому давайте начнем дискуссию.
May I start asking Anke or telling Anke something? Oh, sorry, I don't know how. Oh, maybe. Oh, is this better? Is this?
It's only a bit better.
Oh, and now?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, sorry, this is my mistake. I'm a bit stupid. Anke, can you show this slide? This image of the building, that was called the Warship in Amsterdam, let's say.
Yeah, I hope I can start it because I'm also not very much used to it. I think it was also shown in Ksenia's photo of the Russian exhibition in Moscow.
Yes, but I wanted to say, first of all, it's not in Amsterdam.
Ah, okay.
And even worse, it was not in Amsterdam. It was taken down just a few. Was it 2 years? We have been discussing this the building. It was designed by Emmen, civil engineer Emmen. Yes, and I think they took it down just two years ago to build new sluices in IJmuiden.
I try to find it. So now I'm trying to share it.
And it's very. If it takes too long. Then...
Do you see it?
Yes, we see it. Yes.
On the right, yeah, floating armory in Amsterdam. Of course, you took it because you haven't seen it, I think.
So where is it now? Sorry,
it's called IJmuiden.
IJmuiden.
Yes, which is the how would you call this? Where the ships from Amsterdam go through the Noordzee Canal. They come to IJmuiden and leave the. This is the harbor, so to say, the harbor. Well, it's exclusive. So it was taken down just a few. So I could prove in a way that you hadn't been there, because otherwise you wouldn't have.
No, but I think Ksenia, in your presentation there was a photograph of this too. I don't know if Ksenia is there.
I'm here. Unfortunately, I'm already listening from my iPhone and I can't share the presentation.
But do you recognize the image in the exhibition view, in the photograph from your presentation?
Yes, something similar. Just one moment. I will open and check up on my notebook. Just 1 second. I definitely, this project was shown on the exhibition of 1932 in Moscow and Leningrad.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you, Jan. I will have a look at the internet and then we'll do it, correct it. I will correct the Deutsche Bauhütte, of course.
So you look for Emmen and IJmuiden, I think you will find it.
Emmen.
Just to how difficult it is to.
It's far too.
Yes.
Again, please speak up a bit.
Yeah, I try to. It's. No, as I said, it's more generally speaking, you never can trust your sources, so to say, because of course here it says Havenkantoor and the Altenschleuse Amsterdam, and then people take it for. It's not that I want to criticize you, just more like how difficult it is to know the origin and to know what is true. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. I saw Linda Broosma from University of Utrecht. Maybe Linda have also questions. No.
Hi, so you can hear and see me, I think.
Yes.
Well, I am very interested in the last, I only heard like the last 3 or 4 lectures, which were very interesting. And I am particularly interested in what Nicolas Buenos the Mosquito told us about the Russian dancer and Fonduesburg. And he also shortly, can you hear me, Nicolas? Yes? So you also referred shortly at Malievic. Did you do any research further in the connection between Malievic and Fonduesburg? I think your microphone's not on.
You're right.
Yes, there we are.
Have I done more on, not a great deal more really. I mean, I've read your piece. And I mean, Fonduesburg seems in this story of the relationship of Russia and let's say the Northern European countries, Germany and Holland. Of course, Malievic keeps popping up. I find he's important. I mean, he's extremely important at this point with the 1922 exhibition, and that seems to me something which, to an extraordinary extent, fires up the new Northern European architects, let's say, to define finally an architectural language which they will then stick to. And in a way that seems to me his main, I mean, the other fascinating thing, which we kind of don't know much about, is Fonduesburg's workshop with Lisitsky on the edge of the Bauhaus in 1922, where they seem to have worked quite closely together, but one's always kind of searching for bits of information about what happened. But it does seem to me that Lisitsky was actually present at one or two of those.
He was, yes.
And it seems to me at those 2 points that Fonduesburg plays particularly potent role of communicator, really, between the two. I mean, Fonduesburg is always a tricky figure to deal with. I mean, the point I didn't make is, of course, that while he retains, of course, to some extent, this sense that Russia is not like the rest of Europe. And while he seems at first to be in favor, so to speak, of Lisitsky and this symmetrical view of what the modernist architectural movement is about, of course, in his later criticism, he turns against that and criticizes in the late articles he writes later in the 20s, he seems almost to go back to this first view that Russia is a place which is different and they shouldn't be practicing modernism at all.
Yes, well, his the change in his appreciation of Russian architecture suddenly seemed to change, like within a very short time. And then he starts writing like this unbelievable negative criticism on Russian architecture. For instance, in het bouwbedrijf.
Yeah.
In which he writes, for instance, I'm quoting, from the heart, from the heart, but that is quoting that Russia hasn't been able to build a rainproof shed in the 20th century. So he's very negative. And I always have more or less, but maybe that's something that I like reading about, but I so often have the impression that it has very much to do with personal relations Fonduesburg has with Lissitzky, for instance. Because I think you see this change when Lissitzky writes E und Pan geometrie. I suppose you know the article, in which he says that the style, when they transpose their work in three-dimensionality, they become mere décorateur, making decors. And from that, I have the impression that that is one of the triggers that causes Fonduesburg thinking so negative about Russian architecture and Russian architects.
I mean, on the other hand, you could say he's almost going back to the view he takes when he's creating the Russian dancer. He's saying that Russia is actually a somewhat alien place. And he's toyed with these ideas for a while, but there's also, I'm not sure that his I mean, he obviously was a person who didn't value friendship in a way much. I mean, he has relations with people which are quite kind of negotiated, really. I also think I find there's more consistent. I can find consistencies in Fonduesburg, which I think it's not entirely.
Can I add something?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yes, because I did a book together with Sjoerd van Vaassen on. I can show you it, on Fonduesburg.
Right.
Yeah, and that's in the year 1922. And we didn't find much documentation of his relationship with Malievic, but we did find, of course, a lot of documentation with Lissitzky. And as far as I can see that, of course, Fonduesburg was a very jealous figure. Yeah, when somebody took something over, he immediately dismissed everything. And in this case, most of the correspondence with Lissitzky is taken over by Nelly. Yeah, she does. There's a lot of correspondences with Til Brugman, from Lissitzky, and there's a lot of with others. But actually, at a certain moment, Fonduesburg just dismissed him. He thought he did not get the credit, and of course, he was not credited enough for his participation in what Lissitzky was doing. Strangely enough, there's also the visit of Lissitzky in the Netherlands. I think it was 1925, 1926, where you can see him standing with Mart Stam and with Gerrit Rietveld in the house in Utrecht. And you can see also, we noticed that there's behind them, there's one of the drawings, the contract constructions of Fonduesburg hanging there. And of course, that's also a relationship which is very difficult. All the relationships of Fonduesburg are always difficult, and you can hardly trace them back to what's really happening. Yeah, because he takes revenge with really strongly.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he knocks down everything which is in the way.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's another thing which happens in 1925, which is that Fonduesburg's moved to Paris.
Yes.
And
well, they moved already in 1923 when they broke up with the Bauhaus, more or less.
But and at first, you can see in the Paris architectural press that there's an extraordinary level of interest in Holland and what's going on in Holland and Fonduesburg. And then actually in 1925, after the Russian exhibition, all the press switches to talking about Russia rather than Holland. So I think that in a way backs up your notion that he was, I think, discombobulated by this.
He lashed out to the Dutch because he thought that he had to build a pavilion in 1925. Yeah, and which was done by Weideveld. It was done by Staal, excuse me. Which he didn't like at all. So he really dismissed that whole thing and was extremely jealous of the pavilion of Melnikov.
Mm.
Because he saw that Melnikov was taking, with Fonduesburg, somebody is always stealing his ideas. Yeah.
May I add something as well?
Sure.
I'm not a historian at all. I'm just a simple architect, and I'm looking at buildings as an architect. But I must say about Fonduesburg, although I do not like the type at all, that his articles in Bouwbedrijf are very well written and with a knowledge of construction, of more than of styles, the way built. So I'm not sure about what he wrote about Russian, but there comes, of course, into sight his personality, which I think he was really intolerable man, but I must defend his articles in Bouwbedrijf because they are really good. This is my opinion.
Well, you know, I'm a simple historian, and I think that they were very well informed. Yeah, he knew what was going on, and of course, because he was the sole editor of his magazine, he got a lot of material from all over the world.
All right, but how can someone without any constructional and architectural education know so much about architecture in architectural terms? Are
you asking me or Rem Koolhaas?
Both of you, if you wish. No. This is my I did a bit about Fonduesburg. I had the honor to be invited for a lecture in the so-called Fonduesburg lecture in Madrid once, and in which I criticized him very much on the basis of facts, actually. But people didn't like it, of course, because this is what I would like to ask Nicholas. There's so much appreciation of this man, while everybody knows that he was terrible. What is it in Fonduesburg that makes us talk about him so much and putting him on a high level in the field of architectural history and art history? What is it? Because he was a very bad painter as well.
Well, maybe I can answer that because it's a question which is very much at the core of what we're trying to do. Yeah. You can say he's a bad poet, he's a bad painter, he's a bad architect, but he's an enormously credible, able agitator.
Yeah.
And he can trip over his own legs and still be standing. And I think that's the fundamental thing which we really appreciate in him, that he's really capable, had this virtuosity of interfering with everything and thinking that you're always the best. I think it's lovable in a way.
Well, even these are my last words about it, because but even I have discussed Fonduesburg a lot, and we always are wondering about how it is that there's so much more known and so much more people involved in studying the style than in the nieuwe bouw, the modern movement, so to say. And so there's, while there was just, the style was just nothing. There were I think they made 200 copies.
Yeah, 150 they sold, more or less.
Well, so it's nothing. It's much less than I did, and I haven't done much. But so it's surprising every time that the style comes up every time. And actually, this is my question: was it not just after the war that this appreciation of style began? With I forgot the name, the one from
Sandberg.
Yeah, with Sandberg.
Jaffe.
Yeah, yes, Jaffe.
Jaffe.
He was supposed to write about style after the war. Before there was nothing. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I've got two things I'd like to say. One is, I mean, we say that de Stael had an extraordinarily small circulation. I mean, I'm frequently struck as I potter around architectural modernism that in most countries, you know, there were an extraordinarily small number of actors, an extraordinarily small number of buildings. And, you know, in a sense, it was important. What is so odd is that the only country for which this is not true is Russia. I think something that's been emerging over the last few years, particularly with some of these admirable guidebooks to modernist buildings in various centers in Russia. I expect some of our people present wrote some of them, is the extraordinary quantity of construction in the modernist idiom that there was in Russia compared with everywhere else. You know, it was a quantitatively important movement only really in that country. The other thing about him being a rather unpleasant man, I think one of my favorite jazz musicians is Jelly Roll Morton, who is obviously one of the most unpleasant people who ever lived. But he's nonetheless managed to play some sublime jazz. So I think one has to accept that nasty people can do wonderful things sometimes.
Well, I think there's no clue that gives us the impression that he was a nasty man.
No,
Yeah? You can't really say that. And if you talk about the style, somebody who has become the emblem of the style, then it's Piet Mondrian. Yeah, everybody in the world knows Piet Mondrian. There's no picture of Fonduesburg somewhere, but Mondrian is on every cup in a museum or a T-shirt.
I object. I have one of, actually of the two, both together. Okay.
No, but he didn't have that same fascination as Piet Mondrian in that sense.
No.
Yeah, and of course he was also a very good advocate of himself, because till his death, he was very capable of organizing exhibitions about himself.
Right.
yeah,
And then Nelly took over, and she was his advocate. Eh?
yeah.
Sorry, Herman. Sorry, Nicholas. But this does not explain why we pay so much attention to it.
That's one of the mysteries in history. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also true for music, yeah?
It's because from these small beginnings, rather a lot came, really.
Yeah.
I have one question.
I want to ask Anchor a question. Okay.
Well, you know, I try to find, I can't find it back, but just one of these days, I've tried to prepare some of my old articles, translating into English. And then I found there was a remark rather recent that it was so terrible that and most of the buildings in Amsterdam during the interbellum, so to say, were modern buildings, which is not true. I mean, you have the school by Duiker and Bijvoet, you have the school by Van Tijen, and the house by Stam and etc. And a few more, and that's all. So there isn't much. And then people that Amsterdam was full of modern buildings.
No, I agree. There were very few in most places.
Yeah. Anyway.
I would like to ask one question to Anke.
Yeah.
I'm very curious because you explain the examples from Bouwgoed. And in the Netherlands, we had also a very conservative journal, Katholieke Bouwblad, Catholic building newspaper. And they were also very much criticized as a red danger from Soviet Union, but also more the movement, the new movement architects. And I am very curious if it was a connection between Bouwgoed and Katholieke Bouwblad, or do they have articles from the same authors, and how it was?
Good question.
I don't know at the moment, but there were connections between Wendingen and the Deutsche Bauhütte before First World War, or between the First World War. So they changed articles, or they had the same articles in the Deutsche Bauhütte. So
this is
yeah, this is against your hypothesis somehow, but yeah, one has to do more research about the connections, of course, between these journals and the editors-in-chief.
oh, but
Well, I'm now publishing a book on Kropholler, who was one of the main authors of the Catholic, Roman Catholic thinkers. And you can always,
what was the name? What was the name?
Kropholler. Yeah, nobody knows his work, but he did a lot of.
yeah, I know. I object. I know.
Me too.
If you see the German traditional architects like Schmittener, Bonatz, they didn't publish either in Deutsche Bauhütte. Yeah, they went for Wasmund's Monatsheften or some other magazine. Yeah, in a certain way, they did not like, Deutsche Bauhütten was never really perceived as an important magazine in the Netherlands.
Although it has this tradition and although it existed over 40, 50 years, I think it's true. But
Yeah,
on the other hand,
the existence doesn't prove it. Doesn't some animals are just, you cannot kill them.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, but can I, Anke, you were talking about Weideveld, about articles in Dutch and Bauhütte.
Weideveld?
Weideveld, or who was, no, you sorry.
Wendingen.
Wendingen. Well, who did Wendingen? Who was the leader of Wendingen? Who was the...
Till 1925, it was Weideveld.
Aye.
Then, 1922.
Ah, okay.
Weideveld, was it?
Till 1925.
Yes. So, so I think, but I must think about it, because Weideveld published a little book in 1940, in which you could read as a welcome to the German occupiers. So I don't know. I'd like to think about that. So because Weideveld was not a very modern architect, not a progressive architect, I think. But Herman just disappeared. But maybe oh, there you are. You may be better informed than I am. But all of a sudden, I was thinking, well, this could be the connection, that he was sort of conservative. Weideveld was a conservative, and so yeah, so that could be this.
Well, I think Weideveld was more or less like Fonduesburg. Yeah, he was an agitator, but he was not really politically motivated. Also, Fonduesburg was not motivated politically. There's always discussions going on if the Style should be a political magazine, yes or no, and he really tried to deny it. Although he did try to go to Moscow and sell it to the Russians. He wanted to also to make a Russian copy of the Style.
Weideveld may be one of those people who sold themselves to everybody.
That's hard to say. There are many modernists also who sold themselves to everybody. Yeah. So moralism and architecture is a difficult relationship.
Yeah. Yes. But then again, this was for Anke.
I think it's a very nice, lovely discussion, and we just very animated discussion on 20th century.